wanted to start on Arsenal and talk about the situation with the transfer window. Obviously, Jess, there's been a fair amount of criticism of Arsenal. You know, they didn't land Mudryk, they didn't land João Felix, they couldn't get Caicedo over the line. They ended up with another player after a retirement plan. They ended up with Trossard. On reflection now, a couple of days later, how happy are you with the transfer window for Arsenal?
Yeah, I mean, there's just, if you remove all the context around missing out on primary targets, we did what you're supposed to do in January. You're supposed to reinforce and bolster the squad for the second half of the season. And one of the big things that everybody's been talking about is the lack of depth from an Arsenal perspective. We don't have any depth. We don't have any experience. We have a bunch of kids that are trying to, push for a title. And, I think we've solved some of that, with Jorginho and Trossard, two Premier League proven players that fit straight into what we need. Like if we needed Jorginho tomorrow, he could play tomorrow. If, Trossard has already kind of stepped in and done a good job at Arsenal in the first two games that he's played. So I think we have done a good job there. And with some players coming back, I don't know if you guys have seen, Jesus is running again. Reece Nelson is back. Like we have some players that are coming back into the fold, so that depth is looking better. And so we've done a good job in January in regards to that. In terms of, my biggest gripe is just getting big deals over the line. I think that that's a little bit of a concern, especially for the summer. If we do, push for the title all the way to the end, even maybe win it, and then we're in Champions League next season, you have to be able to get these big deals over the line because these are the type of players that are going to take you to the next level. We're beyond that point of like bringing in 20, 30 million pound players it's like the next level of players are going to cost you a lot. There's going to be a lot of competition for them and you have to get them over the line. And I think that's the best way to support and back your managers to get him your number one targets. And Edu's had a difficult time getting that done. And whether it's he's working with limited funds, in comparison to the other teams that are trying to get those players, that's one thing. If he can't negotiate, that's a problem. And so it does worry me for the summer. We know who our number one target is. It's Declan Rice, but Chelsea will be in for him, maybe Man City. You never really know. Liverpool probably in for him as well. You can't, diddle around and not get those players when we're in an advantageous position. So I do worry about that. And that's my biggest gripe of the window is that we didn't get those deals done. And that's what Arteta wanted. But in terms of what we did in order to push for the title, I think if you look at our squad now, it looks really, really strong going into the back end. It's not City's squad. I'm not saying it's as good as that. But now people can't really say like, okay, well, if Partey gets injured, what happens? Okay, Jorginho comes in. Okay, what if Martinelli or Saka gets injured? Trossard comes in. If Gabriel gets injured, we have Kivior. So, yeah, we did what we needed to do, but there's still some lingering kind of stuff back there. Like, why didn't we get those deals done? And yeah, that's the only thing I didn't like about the window.
I thought it was a blessing in disguise, the Jorginho sign. Was you going to say something quick? Sorry, Jerry.
Yeah, I was just going to elaborate on that because looking from the outside, I know there's this feeling with it amongst Arsenal fans saying, "Oh, but there's this issue. We can't get these big deals done." Arsenal are in a position to actually make those big deals without there being a massive kind of risk. So if I look back at Liverpool didn't make massive, and yeah, of course we spent a lot on Virgil van Dijk, and that was a lot of money, and Alisson. But before that, we had won the Champions League that enabled us to go and get these players. Arsenal win the league this season. You're going to be able to go and attract a different level of player. You're not going to be spending 70 million on a player that's only played 26 games in Caicedo, for instance. Like you're going to be looking at spending 70 million on a Rice or 80 million on a Rice. Now, for me, I think that's the club being quite smart in the transfer window and looking at it and saying, you know what, for now, what do we need? We need strength in depth. Yes, if we can get that Caicedo deal over the line or the Mudryk deal over the line, cool. But we're not going to go and overspend the odds because spending that money means that he's got to go and deliver right now. He's got to be your starting midfielder. He's not coming in to go and back up what Partey is doing and stuff. And if he doesn't work out and you don't win the league, for instance, then you're going to be left in a tricky situation where he's got to go and perform now. And if he doesn't, you've got a problem. So I don't know. Yeah, Kaz, sorry. Yeah, I know I interrupted you a bit, but
no. I thought he's just, you know, it is when I spoken last before Jess, and then I was thinking, yeah, we're gonna get that turn, in it. You know what I mean? Like Lewis is just he's turning Super Saiyan soon, because you know, if anyone don't know Lewis from beforehand, yeah, the chest with Chelsea and everything, yeah, wait till next season. But he's
Wait till
charging up.
next season, bro.
I think this is a great deal for Arsenal. Why? It's because the deal itself, I think, is a year with a extended option, so they can get rid of him quick if need be. And I don't feel 80 million Caicedo was the right move yet. And I don't think Caicedo is really that caliber of player either, in my opinion. I think he's very good, but not that good. You know, I think maybe Declan Rice is more like for Xhaka, if I'm thinking of that box-to-box tenacious player. I think Caicedo can play the same role, but I just feel 80 million in this window currently, I think they're still going to win the league, regardless if they got Jorginho or not. What they do lack, I think, is a bit of physicality in that midfield just for backup, roughly. But, you know, I suppose you put some legs and stuff around Jorginho, you might see him thrive a little bit more, whereas Chelsea, what Jorginho around it was a Kovacic and a Mount, not exactly the greatest legs, you could say. Mason Mount, yes, didn't really play in the 8 anyways, a bit weak as well to help him out. Because I remember the Jorginho when he first arrived at Chelsea. I'm not going to say but as a backup, remember, he's not a star, he's a backup, first and foremost, in case of Partey's injury. So he's not going to play every game. But to tell me that if you're having the whole game to yourself, who said now Partey can go in I believe, the role what Xhaka's playing if needed, and Jorginho can come and you can really dictate a game more and more and more. So I think it's a good option that they've done this, and I think they've saved themselves from the summer of like getting like an average player. Oh, you're going to pay 80 million for Caicedo, then cool, you bought him now. We want 100 million for that player. That's what happened with Mudryk, you know.
Yeah,
and we sparked that off.
Exactly. I think as well. I think going into like a title race that Arsenal were in, you need experience. You don't need a player that's not played a lot of games and that you're hoping that his form for a team where there's not a lot of pressure and they're playing loads of like great football, that you're hoping that transcends into this team that's going to go for a title. That's a different level of pressure. The reason why these players are doing really well is because they've been in it from the beginning. Adding any players to those, they have to be the right type of player. But looking at what Jorginho's done in terms of winning the Champions League at Napoli, in the Euros as well, it's not going to phase him being in that kind of dressing room and that dynamic and going into that. Caicedo's going to have the pressure, or a signing of that kind of caliber is going to have the pressure of not only the price tag, but then I've got to deliver right now, because if we don't, for whatever reason, one of the main reasons is because I didn't perform as well. So
yeah, I hear you on that. So go on, Jess.
No, the only thing I'm going to say is, like, I know Arsenal fans don't really want to hear this, but like, it's going to take time for us to like build our reputation back up, a reputation that wasn't even big for buying players. Like, I was having this argument before with some other people, like, we've never really went out there and bought world-class players. Like, that's not really what we've done. And so we don't have clout in the market, and we're not really known for doing those types of deals. And so when you've been bad for like a decade, you have to build that reputation back up. And it is going to take, like JJ has already said, winning trophies and showing you're that caliber and that level to get players to choose you first and not to turn their heads and stuff like that. So it's going to take a while, but it's so important for us to end the season strong, because a lot of what we want to do in the future that we're talking about, the Rices and other stuff like that, it really hinges on what we do at the end of the season. And so it's going to take time to build that up. You know, we've been bad for so long, and just because we're being good for, you know, a year and a half or something, like, it's just going to take time. But the club also have to be prepared to do the business. And so by the end of the season, I expect them to be able to finish these deals off, because Arteta is the type of manager to me that, like, if he doesn't get what he needs, like, maybe he will look away, you know. So we need to be able to get him #1 targets at some point.
Yeah,
if he's doing what he's supposed to be doing.
But Arteta also has got a reputation of going for a different type of player or a different position altogether, because Zinchenko and Lisandro Martin, and I know we had this argument at the end of the end of the window. Lisandro was being bought as a left back and he'd play inverted. He's not very good at that. And for me, I feel like your manager misses out on targets and he just goes for other areas or different types of players. So the fact that he's gone for Jorginho rather than a B-Tech version of Caicedo is a better option, because he's got a different plan of action. Man United missed out on Frankie de Jong, and instead of going for we were already signing Eriksen with or without Frankie de Jong. That was happening. But instead of going for a different type of Frankie de Jong, a version that wasn't as good, like a Rabiot, he went and bought a Casemiro, which is a different type. And that is what top quality managers do. And I think Arteta has done very well with J5. And I know that he kind of burnt out, not J5 anymore, J20, isn't he? But with Jorginho, I feel like he burnt out a little bit at Chelsea. I feel almost as though what he joined Chelsea to do, i.e. play for Sarri under Roman, has kind of just run its course. But what is the expression? A change is as good as a rest. I think it's a very good piece of business from Arsenal. And Trossard, long term, I think Mudrik's going to be a better player than Trossard. But over the next couple of years, as a support act for Martinelli to maybe go in centrally sometimes, a bit of speed, bit of pace, I think Trossard's going to be an excellent signing for Arsenal. And as you say, some will call it PR. And I know I call out PR for clubs all the time. But in the summer, I believe Arsenal are going to go big. The only time this works out poor is if the money that you haven't spent this window on Declan Rice's and Caicedo's and Mudrik's is if you don't do it in the summer. Like you win the league and then it's almost you have a £60 million summer and don't really improve the squad. And I think all of us have got to hold our clubs to account at all times when they start behaving that way. And equally, Caicedo didn't join Chelsea. If you'd have lost him to Chelsea, then it's a bit of an issue because he is a main target and nobody wants to lose out on their targets. And maybe Arsenal walked away because they knew that even Chelsea were not going to be able to get him. I feel like would you have lost out on two main targets to the same club in one window? Probably not. And with hindsight, we now know that even Chelsea weren't able to get him. So maybe Arsenal felt we'd step back and we go again in the summer. It's going to be an interesting one because Chelsea and Arsenal are both looking at Caicedo and both looking at Declan Rice as well. So it's going to be a real interesting one. What do you make of it, Luke?